2012, Ed, turning the corner, it was, what do I want to do now? Because this is no longer about something that will happen in the future. This is going to be the future. And the question then is, what can I do for the greatest amount of effect? And I'm in a service to others role, and so are you. And I'm just really, frankly, sick to death of feeding fear. What about you?
Exactly the same feeling.
And that's not to say we don't do the work, but I do see a lot of the fear mongering, and especially with what went on with Elenin. And gosh, that reminds me of things I have read that extraterrestrial races feed off of our fear. It nourishes their twisted, dark little souls. Yeah, I don't know. That could kind of work. But, you know, the feeding the fear nonsense is, for me, it's come to a screeching halt.
I think that's the right transition.
Yeah. Yeah, what I really want to do is focus on the people who can make a difference. And so my thoughts really now go to the Planet X Town Hall. And that was the reason why I wanted to do this interview and the first interview of 2012 with you, because you and Barbara and Janushka and the other folks, moderators, admins, members of the board, to me are the real family. They're the ones that I know I can do the most for, because their minds are open to new possibilities. They're not stuck in dogma and doctrine. You know, and then going in that role, though, the question is how do we move forward? Because getting your ass kicked by the elites is no fun either.
No, it's not our favorite thing to do.
Not our favorite thing to do. Going into it, just out of curiosity, because we've got our segments we pre-recorded, and just so my listeners understand, I do this now because, frankly, it's a way to end run the tampering that we have on this show all too often. I'm sure those of you who've been steady listeners have heard how many times we've come under attack. And the thing about it is a pre-recorded segment, once I hit the play button, it's just going to go. And that's it. And they can take me off completely, and that's actually happened. I've lost my control panel, my connections have been severed, but that darn little file, like an Energizer bunny, bing-a-da-bing-a-da-bing-a-da-bing, keeps on going. I love that. And so it's this game of cat and mouse. But we'll get into this first one. Before we get into the first segment, you got any advanced thoughts on that, Ed?
I just hope the people enjoy it. As I think we're turning a corner, and the people should be interested in this.
Absolutely. Now, for those of you in the chat room, we'll be monitoring, so if you have questions, throw them out there. Be polite. Nothing nasty, nothing crude. You know, as I always say, hey, cowboy, this is my saloon. Hang your 6-shooter next to the door and you be nice to Miss Kitty, or you will leave the premises feet first. Be a good cowboy and you'll have yourself a hell of a good time. And that's the truth. So with that, heck with it. Let's just get the ball rolling, get right into segment one. And as we do, I'll be available to take calls. For those of you who got questions for me and Ed, we'll be at the break. And the guest call-in number is 818-495-6962. That's 818-495-6962. And again, we'll be looking in the chat room for questions. Enjoy, y'all. Well, Ed, it's been some time now with Comet Elenin, and the story has pretty much faded out of view, but we were on this for several months. We did just brilliant research on it. And I think, in my personal opinion, we achieved some real results with Comet Elenin. One was, first off, we gave people a way to look at the information objectively, which was really important because there was so much fear and hysteria, but also We were partially validated in certain respects on predictions that we made. And third, I think the one thing that we did that probably annoyed elites the most was that we gave our listeners a soft landing so that they could rationally and objectively balance the concerns with what was actually going to happen. And you were a key player in that. So overall, as you look back on Comet Elenin, because I think this was a really recent and key thing to look at for many different reasons, what do you believe that we did, we achieved, and what we proved?
Well, first, let me say hello to everyone. And I think that we showed the good sense of just showing the possibilities of what this object could have done. If it had stayed intact, and the Torah code said it was not going to stay intact, and that it was going to break up like pieces, or into pieces, and it did. Mm-hmm. Had it stayed intact, I would personally believe the charge that it held would have been much greater from one large object than the charge that it held as a mass of smaller objects.
Right.
We did have the electrical interaction. I think things sort of came together we were protected somehow by our moon, for one thing. Mm-hmm. The moon happened to be between us and the comet at the time we needed it to be. Mm-hmm. It had broken into pieces, which was a blessing for us. And we still had a rather considerable electrical interaction with that comet.
That was, I think, around the 17th?
I think it was October 17th.
October 17th. In my own case, I actually saw a bolide. I felt the sun burning my face as a result of an X-class flare. We saw two large satellites that deorbited and were unplanned. They lost control of them. One the size of a bus, one's the size of a minibus. And the solar winds, as a result of this storm activity between Elenin and the sun, blew them out of their orbit, and they hit the upper atmosphere, and that was it. Game over. And they deorbited. So, we did see things, and we did see a cause and effect relationship. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And we sort of nailed it right on, probably by accident. Having a long-time electrical background, I just went with what was the science said, and the science said that this was going to happen. And we were fortunate that events came about that what really could have happened did not happen.
Yeah, and I mean, it was serious enough that, NASA had announced that they could potentially de-man the International Space Station in November when we knew we'd be flying through the dust tail.
Absolutely.
So there were genuine concerns there.
Oh, without a doubt. And I really, in my own heart, believe we just got lucky.
Yeah.
This comet could have caused us a lot of damage. I might compare it to people knowing what happens when someone gets struck by lightning, and they have a lightning bolt, which is extremely high voltage, go through their body. Mm-hmm. Now, if you could imagine the high voltage from an interaction with a comet going through your body, that over a large area, which would mean there's a whole bunch of people having it go through their body. Mm-hmm. That's the interaction that could have happened with that comet, and we avoided it.
We did, but I think it foreshadows what we're going to see more of coming in the years ahead. And, in crossing the cusp, what I'm showing is that we have a solar event that will occur late in 2012 that is, according to the Avebury 2008 formation, it's going to scorch the Earth. And
well, we'll discuss some of that later with the remote viewing.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the thing to do. What I have observed more than anything else with the whole Comet Elenin story was something that it was a flood of disinformation and propaganda, whipping up fears, the likes of which I haven't seen in a decade. I mean, we're sitting here And this show is airing in December 2011. Well, I began researching Planet X in December 2001. That was when I really started getting into it seriously.
Exactly.
And I published my first article in January 2002. So I've been on this story for a full decade now. And in that time, I have seen the elites whip up the propaganda and disinformation machines, but nothing on the scale of Comet Elenin. I mean, it was just stunning in its scope.
Oh, it's one method to control people.
Yeah.
Through fear. And it was like P.T. Barnum said, there's a sucker born every minute.
Yeah.
And they were taking advantage of that philosophy because they were throwing fear out there and people were believing it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was to make money, and I'm sure there were millions made somewhere off of it, if not on Wall Street. So many effects that we didn't want, which we maintained on our scientific research that it was just possibilities. And please prepare this way, prepare that way, for this is possible. It's not inherent. It's not absolute. It's just a possibility. Don't go selling your farm and go live in a tunnel.
Yeah, that was the Terrell Croft thing, which really turned out to be a disappointment. I mean, Terrell, to me, just, he is one of those throwaway shills that they know how to manipulate. They find a guy like Terrell Croft, and they go, hey, all we got to do is leave the gate open. He'll do the rest.
Terrell was terrific with his research. He was unfortunate in the items that he was given as the answers to his research. And I think he sort of panicked a little bit, I believe, and just absolutely made a stunning statement that this was going to happen, and you're going to have to get underground with me and be in this tunnel, and I need this much money to buy food, and if you don't have enough food, I'm sorry, you can't come in. And then that instills fear in other people.
Yeah, it was.
And they just propagated it in that method.
It was just so much fear. And I remember so clearly for me in all of the interviews that I did, because not only we were doing our shows, but I was appearing on other radio shows. And I literally at one point just said, I can't do this anymore, because when you're doing a live show, the problem with a live show, particularly with this topic, is if people are in a state of fear, they're going to project that fear. Because I'm the guy talking, that fear is projected at me, and all of a sudden you have thousands and thousands of people out there that are, in some sort of state of fear, of anger or despair or whatever. I would feel that. And after doing the interview, I was drained. I was really, really drained.
I can imagine, because if you would have made one wrong statement, it would have helped the fear.
That's right. And so it was, people wanted the information, but they didn't know what they wanted to do with it. So there's that clinging on to somebody saying, oh, yeah, the disaster is going to happen tomorrow, so you can plan for it to happen tomorrow, or it's not going to happen at all. And that message didn't seem to resonate that well. I saw videos out there that were saying, this is all nonsense and you're stupid, the same mock and ridicule stuff. And you could see these things really didn't get traction, nowhere near the amount of folks followed them that followed us.
Yeah, I think there was two extremes.
There was.
The ones that were going to die tomorrow, and the ones that there's no fear from this object. And I think we were in the middle.
We were in the middle, and I think, again, we gave folks a soft landing. And, the first thing I said in the video was, where's all this disinformation coming from? Because it was so artificial. Again, I've been doing this for a decade, and you just get your thumb on the pulse of events.
Exactly. Unless you listen to what somebody told you, and then you would probably do it incorrectly.
That's right. there was this real clear pattern of drawing people into a highly charged state of fear. But I think this was done principally by the elites with a very specific goal in mind, which was to gather up all of this growing interest. Because what I saw through 2008 and then going into 2009 was a tremendous resurgence in interest in Planet X and 2012 topics. Then, along comes Comet Elenin, and wow, what a great way to go harvest up all this interest out there and run it down a rabbit hole.
Exactly.
And that was the whole aim of it, and they were largely successful in it. In some places, it didn't make a dent. Planet X Town Hall is still ever as active as it always has been, and it is continuing to grow.
And we've had so many people thank us and thank us for, even on the phone calls we received during the radio shows.
Yeah.
Thanking us for telling them the truth and for them to not panic and, like you say, the soft landing. And we did this, so we accomplished this through weeding through the BS when we researched.
Yeah.
And we did our own research, and we went with facts and with science, and we didn't lie to anybody. We kept it real.
Yeah, we did. I think, in looking back on it, if I were to take one lesson from that whole episode, is that if you are coming to the topic in a state of fear, and you're dealing with people that are in a state of fear, then what happens is that you really don't have the protection of love, which is very, very powerful, very insulating. You're in a loving state. You're in a malice-free state, which is important. We'll talk more about this later. And for me, the lesson of Comet Elenin is that these things are going to happen, these what I call propaganda panics.
Sideshows.
Sideshows. I mean, that's what they're really doing, and trying to stir people and kill interest in a topic, and they did to a very large extent. Although over the years I've seen them do this and the topic just comes back. It's something that has legs. It's persistent. They can't kill it. They're just trying to control it. It's no more different than treating cancer with chemotherapy and hoping it doesn't, come back to haunt you a few years later down the road.
Right.
But it does. All right. And that's the case with this topic. It's not going to let go. They're just simply throttling it and killing interest, humiliating people, making them feel stupid for opening their minds to awareness. That was the whole point of it.
Well, they have numbed the public. They numbed them.
Yeah.
By doing the fear tactic. Now they're sort of numbed about anything that could happen right now.
That's right. But then when something really big happens, those cobwebs are going to get swept away. And I know that just simply because that is what I have seen happen in the past. They can kill interest in the topic until something really big happens. Say a La Palma eruption, a major devastation somewhere, and this is going to happen. The trends are there. People are going to be jumping back in. The problem is that when they jump back in, they've lost all of this time to prepare and to make ready because they've been manipulated. So to me, what the elites are really doing is they're just simply taking a eugenics view of this. People who do not see it coming and who are not prepared for it are the most likely to die.
Oh, absolutely. And I do believe that there are going to be so many that do come to us, but it'll probably be a little late.
It'll be late.
And what we're trying to really accomplish at this point in time is the people that have prepared not to let their guard down and unprepare.
I agree.
To stay prepared.
I agree. And I also think that there's even a bigger thing here at stake. And in our next segment, that's what I want to get into it, because I believe the time has come for those who are planning to survive the tribulation to focus on the bigger issue. That is, how the meek inherit the earth, and we'll get into that in our next segment.
Okay, I can do that.
Well, hey, that one, we got the show off to a good start there, Ed, don't you think?
Hey, you made it look or sound pretty.
Yeah, it works.
I'd like to make one correction, Mr. Masters.
Okay.
I made a mistake on our original thing because I looked at my notes wrong. Our inferior conjunction with the comet was on September 26th and not October 17th. Other than that, everything was right on.
Okay, thanks for that update correction. We do have a caller that has a question, so didn't get a chance to screen, but I'll bring them in. And hello, caller.
Hi, how are you?
Hi,
Hello.
who's this? Where are you from?
Hi, this is Robin.
Hi, Robin.
Hi, Marshall. I've only been reading your information and listening to your information online for maybe a couple of months now. I was totally unaware. And I have a couple of quick questions. I'm in South Florida, and I have finally found myself in a situation where I'm going to be able to work from home. And so I'm considering getting out of South Florida, but I have to stay in Florida. Any suggestions on where?
Yeah, I got one question first, though, for you. You came into awareness kind of shortly. For most of us, it's like getting slapped in the face with a dead salmon. You just stand there spitting scales, wondering what happened. Did that size it up for you?
Yeah, I just, and it's the craziest thing. It all started when I was helping my Boy Scout son find, he had to do a report on a speech for Boy Scouts for a citizenship badge that he's working on, and it started out with looking for a speech from Kennedy, and it went from there. So first I went through all of the, what's his name, Alex, forgot his name now. I went through all of his stuff, and then I came to this. So I just, I can move. I'm fine. I'm at the situation where I can move and buy upstate. I know that there is a nuclear plant up in upstate on the West Coast, and then the other nuclear plant is down south of Miami on the East Coast. So obviously I have to avoid that. It's a narrow state. I have to stay middle of the state. Am I kind of right, north of Okeechobee?
Okay. Well, yeah, I think I think both Ed and I will answer that. And first thing I have to say is I love your awareness story. You're the first person I've ever heard that found awareness on this topic by doing a Boy Scout merit badge.
Yeah.
Someone like that needs to be helped. And here's some general guidelines, all right? Yeah. First off, with Florida, any coastal areas are a bone to be chewed, all right? And the further you get inland, the better. If you're near the sea level, try and get 40, 50 miles inland. So what you want to aim for is, and this is like a scoop pack strategy from my book, Planet X Forecast, where you have to stage yourself in rally points. And you might want to take this opportunity of time to pre-position some caches for yourself somewhere and have a final destination in mind. But first thing you want to do is, A, you have to be in sufficient awareness of everything that goes on to give yourself at least a 24-hour heads up. I mean, there's folks that say, yeah, go to live in, Africa or South America, and it's like, yeah.
It's not going to be any better there.
Yeah, and I don't have gazillions of dollars to go down there and build bunkers.
Right.
And you live where you live, okay? You work where you work. You are where you are. The question is if you have that 24 hours. 24 hours gives you plenty of time to move 50, 100, 200 miles ample access to food, fuel, lodging, supplies, all at market prices. But once the word hits CNN, it's Panicville, and if you're caught in the grind, you die in the grind. So the first thing you have to do is have your own particular strategy of what you're doing. Be aware of threats in your area. For you, anybody along the east coast of the United States, and I'm talking from Maine down to actually, southern tip of Florida, and for those folks that live in the Caribbean, you want to be watching what's happening in the Canary Islands right now. And we see there's a new uplift that's happening, a new volcano that is rising up, a new seamount that's around Faro. And Faro in the archipelago there is south of La Palma. La Palma has got two volcanoes, one old and one new, and relatively speaking. And if that thing pops off, then its western flank could unlodge, and that would send a horrific wall of water that would just inundate the east coast of the United States from the tip of Florida to the tip of Maine, period.
And so far, how far inland, though?
It could go, well, it depends on the estimates, but the wave height is anywhere, depending on who you're talking to, from 100 to 300 feet high, which you would want to, at least be 40 miles inland. Think back to the Sumatra superquake and tsunami. Go look at that footage.
Right.
And or look what happened in Japan, double that devastation. And if you are planning for that as your initial cushion, that's an initial place. But again, you want to have a way that you can fall back. So if you're, as you're heading, generally what you're looking for is get away from coastal areas with a combination of distance and height from sea level. All right.
Right.
Now,
yeah, Florida, though, all of Florida is there's only a couple of little places that are more than 150 feet above sea level. Yeah.
Well, I don't recall anything called a mountain in Florida. But
yeah. They just have
a little rough.
Thicker dirt.
Yeah, that's it. You got a bigger pile of dirt. So with Florida, one of the things that you do have is because of the dense foliage, that will, as compared with other places, all right, water hitting Florida is going to, think of it as hydraulic sandpaper. Yeah, but Florida's got a tremendous amount of vegetation. That's going to pull a lot of energy out of it.
Slow it down. That's going to
It'll slow it down. Whereas a tsunami hitting somewhere else, like, Los Angeles, for example, I mean, something hit there, it's gone. But your main thing is awareness and keeping your tank tanked up. You should have a scoop pack in your car. You need to be able to,
what's a scoop pack?
A scoot pack is in Planet X Forecast and 2012 Survival Guide. What we're talking about is a scoot pack is essentially you have a 3 to 5 day supply of whatever on your back. You're going to have, basic things to get you through. You're going to have clothing. You're going to have gear.
Clothes, food, water.
Yeah, those kind of things which you can carry on your back. And a lot of people underestimate that. Usually for a scoot pack, I think 20 to 30 pounds, depending on your weight, your physical condition, what you can do. If you're, one of the things that's really important is gather your stuff now while it's still affordable, but take it out and wear it, walk it, test it. All right, and if you cut corners on things like I'm talking about a scoop pack is just like backpack that college kids are going to be wearing, okay?
Yeah.
Now, those are fine as long as they're really well made. You want broad straps that are padded. You want a padded back. The last thing you need to have is walking 10 miles with some can of beans jabbing your kidneys every step of the way. Yeah. And so you need to think through those things, and that book will give you a real plan for that. And Yeah.
I was planning to go on and buy some of the books. The thing for the immediate, though, is I can move out of South Florida, and I can do it this summer. And I was kind of hoping to know where I should go to buy to buy a house, or, that's in, little more rural, not the city, that's north of, that's north of Okeechobee, probably a little north of Orlando.
Well, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't wait for the summer. And with that, Ed, why don't you weigh in on this one?
Okay, I'd like to. Hello, Robin.
Hi.
I would look Orlando-ish on up, mid-state, mid-state being between the Gulf and the East Coast.
Right, kind of
with the idea.
Center vertically,
Well, you obviously had some hurricane surges and things like that down, and you've seen how that works. And imagine a hurricane surge of 80 feet coming in. That might be kind of tough. I would do it with the preparation of an escape route, because you've got the Smoky Mountains and the southern part of those just north of you there in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I would prepare myself an escape route, might even sort of pre-map it out, not using major interstates because they're going to be packed, and know some back routes using state routes and things like that to get yourself out of the Florida area if it's necessary. And none of us know how high we're going to have to be yet. I've heard so many different estimates. All I can say is the higher we can get, the better off we'll be. And even I have I'm about 700 feet up, and I have an escape route to try to get me a couple thousand feet up. And I'm just trying to plan ahead, and Marshall hit it right on with having an escape bag to put on your back, because you never know when things are just jam-packed on a freeway, and you actually got to go by foot. And going by foot, you may find a motorcycle or a bicycle somewhere along the way, and you take advantage of that. Even horses, animals, and things. I would use anything at my disposal. And I would plan for escape. Mm-hmm. I'd learn in a hurry. The tail is the end that you don't want to face.
And the elevation is mainly because of water?
Yes. If we have a tsunami, or even global flooding due to the melting of the ice caps and such, and the glaciers, we could see a substantial rise in the ocean level. Most of Florida is not more than 10 feet above sea level. I won't say much more about it that way, but I would have myself a good escape route, because if the sea level rises, it'll do it slowly. It's not like it's going to happen overnight. Holy cow, the ocean went up 40 foot last night. No, it's not going to happen that way. But inch by inch, it's going to start creeping in, and you'll have ample warning, and you'll be able to make for an escape route and to get yourself to a much higher location.
Are they ever? Will there ever be an official announcement of this Planet X? Will there ever be an official announcement that? Do you think that this thing is upon us, or they're just going to let it all happen?
I think science will try to hide it. They've been trying to hide it. We've seen that with other objects. How many people even knew about Comet Ellen? And that thing could have taken us down. But it'll be seen by amateurs, and amateurs are the ones that will report it. And yes, you'll have some warning. But, the amateur telescopes, yeah, they don't reach out like a 30-inch scope will.
Does it seem like right now it's looking like towards the end of next year? or sooner?
I think we're just going to slowly build into things this year, and we're already seeing some escalation. Ireland had 13-foot waves the other day. We had a volcano erupt today. We were just constantly seeing things happen. I got to remember where it was. I think it was in Indonesia. But then again, they have them go off over there all the time.
Yeah, these reports just come in so fast.
Yeah, and is Nibiru, is it within the Jupiter orbit yet, or it's still outside of Jupiter orbit?
Well, there are two trains of thought on what it is. If it's one of the satellites of the brown dwarf, because we're just like 100% sure that we're a binary star system.
Right, right.
If Nibiru turns out to be one of the satellites of the dwarf star, then we're going to have a heck of a time seeing it until it's close. And that would put it within the orbit of Jupiter at this time. Normal speed for something like that would be about 45 million miles every month or two. So I always say about a half AU a month.
An astronomical unit, by the way, folks, is the distance, approximate distance from Earth to the Sun.
Yeah, I was getting ahead of myself. Thank you, Marshall.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, you know me, I'm a nitpick for lexicon.
I sometimes get carried away with myself here, and but if it's the brown dwarf, you'll have plenty of warning on that, except it may be faster moving. So even though we'll see it from a farther distance, it'll be traveling faster, and it may virtually be about the same thing.
Yeah.
So about how much more advanced warning would you say?
I'm thinking we're going to have maybe a month.
Okay.
About that. You know, what I can tell you is that my philosophy at this point is, yeah, amateur astronomers could see it in advance of a month's warning. But, folks, think about what happened during the BP oil spill. I mean, we had CNN going on every cotton pick and night, you know, and saying, hey, we can't get there. BP goons are blocking us, and they have authorization from the feds. And so what we saw was a real-time whitewash of a major event, one where there was enough Corexit that was sprayed that it actually stalled the Gulf current for a while, and which I reported on my site. So they can have a real-time cover-up of this, and also, you know, this object is coming up from the south. In my book, Crossing the Cusp, I give you a very exact trajectory for Planet X and exactly when we're going to see it, which will be the end of next year. Towards the end, actually, it'll be before the solstice. And all of this is laid out in the book meticulously, frame by frame, based on the Avebury 2008 formation, which was an amazing thing, the size of nearly 4 soccer fields that have materialized over a period of 2 days. In one part and then the other. So on a more practical basis, I call it the 7 by 35 threshold. And 7 by 35 is the most popular size of binoculars people have. It's really affordable. We use them for going to sporting events, bird watching, and whatever. There's just oodles of these things laying around. So when we get to the point where folks can stand out in their backyards with a pair of 7 by 35 binoculars, that's about the time they'll start talking about it, and not a day sooner. And what will happen before that will be what we saw with the BP oil spills, that the government and the goons are just simply going to saddle up and suppress anything coming out. And yeah, there'll be a few YouTube videos, but, you know, statistically speaking, folks, those of us that are in awareness, in terms of our numbers relative to 7 billion souls on the planet, is we're a speck of dust on the tuchus of a flea, on the tuchus of a dog, on the tuchus of an elephant being eaten by a dinosaur. Does that put it in perspective? So it's up to you and where you're going to go with it. And with that, I've really enjoyed taking this call. We're going to move on into the next session. And for those of you, if we have some interesting questions, there was in the chat room, there was something there, a link from one of the folks to a paranormal site about Obama denying the existence of UFOs. It's like, yeah, so what?
Change my train of thought now.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Robin.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, Rob. And with that, Ed, let's rock and roll in. If we have something here from the second, I'm looking just fast at the chat room. No, we don't have. Okay, with that, let us rock and roll. Well, Ed, in this segment, I really want to focus on what those who are planning to survive the tribulation need to be thinking about as the larger transcendent issue. I've been immersed in this topic now for a full 10 years, and that really gives you a perspective of time. I think that when I look back on all of this, I think one of the most critical things is integrity. It's the one thing that seems to transcend the propaganda, disinformation, and lies of the elites, and it's out there. And interestingly enough, the person I learned that from was Nancy, leader of Zeta Talk.
She's been consistent.
She's been consistent, and yeah, we disagree with her on certain things, and she's been on my show several times. I've always adored her because she does what she does for love, and my motivation is exactly the same. I do what I do for love.
Neither of you have given in, and that's the big plus.
That's the big plus. And when I look back on the non-event of 2003, and that's the reason why I can say that with Comet Ellen, and this was a very artificial, hyped up fear event, and it was a panic stampede, that it was an intentional PTB panic stampede, was when I look back at 2003 for listeners, you might see this mentioned somewhere. Usually NASA is the one that takes in their quips and their attacks, you go back to 2003. And the guy that really generated that was Mark Hazelwood, wrote a book called Blindsided. And all he really did was he was in Nancy Leader's groups, and he lifted her material and plagiarized it, took her book and directly plagiarized it. Nancy even sent me a copy of the letter her attorney had sent to him with a cease and desist demand. And the bottom line was he knew that even though he had stolen her material, she'd have to come up with $20,000, $30,000 in advance for litigation against somebody that, fine, get a judgment. Now you got to go collect it. And so Nancy just gave up on pushing it. It was economically beyond her reach. But with 2003, there was this forecast that in June of that year, we would see Planet X in the sky very clearly, and the guacamole would hit the fan, as I like to say, and it didn't happen that way. And I saw interest in the topic crash. But I will say that even with as much activity as we've had with the Comet Ellen story this year, it was half of that, of the blindsided Hazelwood story with Nancy Leader of 2003. And I remember the fear so clearly. We were reading letters, people were writing to us, emails, and they're trying to sound rational and in control of what's happening. And in between the lines, the fear was oozing out everywhere. And it just was disheartening, and we did our best to deal with it, and we reported accurately. We did an exclusive interview with Zachariah Sitchin, who was alive at that time, and he actually approached me to do the interview, and because we were saying, no, this is not happening in 2003, and he agreed the same thing, and we just published an article to say that. Well, after the 2003 event in August, the whole topic of Planet X was DOA. And Nancy today is as popular as she was in 2003 before the non-event, if not more so, because of her integrity. She was always honest, upfront about who she was. She shared her stuff. She didn't try and manipulate people. Mark Hazelwood was doing that. Well, Hazelwood now is a footnote. He's toast. I don't think that most of the people out there even recognize the name. And when you do hear it today, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, him.
You know that she maintained her truth and kept telling her truth, which you've done. And I've been very happy to be a small part of it and maintaining that integrity here in the recent couple years. And I'd like to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate everything you've done and everyone on the Planet X Town Hall has done. And I'm just so glad that the community is giving comfort to people who are in awareness.
Well, I truly believe that the people on the town hall, the people that have watched the videos, and have been awakened, as we term it, I believe they've been chosen. And that's why they've come to us, and other places also that give integrity a good name.
Yeah.
I believe they've been chosen people, and which is why we don't have the multitudes.
That's right.
And they're the ones that we've got to count on to be prepared, and even to prepare to help others to get through what's coming.
Yes.
And we all know there's something coming.
That's right. We know that there's something coming, and I think you phrased the word properly with chosen. In other words, it's a matter of choice. For me, it's something that people are chosen because that's what they chose to do before they incarnated. Before they came to this world, they incarnated. You know, it was interesting. When I was doing all the research for Crossing the Cusp, Surviving the Edgar Casey Pole Shift, we were working with numerous sensitives and entities, incarnated, unincarnated, and extraterrestrial, over an 18-month period of time. We had a very strong protocol. No one voice is omnipotent. Somebody says, I am the only voice of God. We go, you be the only voice somewhere else.
You got that right.
You know, that's it. Boy, you know, it's like you hit the exit door real fast. The second thing was that we really focused on trends as opposed to specifics, because it is subjective. And so what we were looking for, what are the recurring themes that keep popping up? That I call them the beating drums, if you will. And then the third thing was that we used cross-reference questions to make sure that we didn't have what I call sensitive filtering, because the guides, when you're channeling them, they're brutally honest. I mean, they don't pull the punches. They're going to answer and they're going to show things. And this was a problem that we had with our sensitives, because they would be seeing the future and it would be so depressive for them that I knew that at a certain point I had to pull the plug before that person went any further, so that they could just ease out of it and put it out of mind.
Now, if you can't handle the answer, don't ask the question.
Absolutely. Except the problem was is all of them felt that they knew they could ask the question. They knew they could get the answer. But they didn't expect to see the things that they saw. And they saw terrible things. And, you know, so that was a real problem for them. But the recurring tom-toms, if you will, that we were hearing was that, first off, there's a huge amount of interest in what's happening on Earth right now, all throughout the galaxy, all right? That there's many other entities, whether they're incarnated, unincarnated, or extraterrestrial. And it was interesting, the dialogues we have with the three were different personalities, different view of things, different essence. With the extraterrestrial races we came across, there was always this recurring warning. It didn't matter who we were contacting, that we were really coming to a point where we would have to make a decision, which is perfectly illustrated by the Hopi prophecy rock, which says we're either going to take a path of evolution and harmony, and it's going to be good, or we're going to keep going this path, we're going to wind up not doing very well, and we're going to meet a short end. What the guides were really saying to us, in essence, and this was again and again and again, all the way across the board, all kinds of entities, is that what's coming in the future is our future for humanity. It's our evolved future. It's the end result of this transhuman process that we're going through right now. But that the elites, they're not in that future. They can't exist in that future, only if they bluff their way into it. So right now I see us in this vicious game of 7-card stud, and they're bluffing and just simply raising the ante so that everyone else is wondering whether they should just fold their hand, which is what they did to Occupy Wall Street. They really trashed that movement, and very effectively. If they prevail, if they are able to project their current power into the post-historic world after the tribulation, then we're doomed to countless generations of slavery. The earth is going to be hopelessly exploited and destroyed. Our planet is going to be ravaged. And finally, we'll get our freedom once there's really nothing left for anyone of interest. And we were told this by other extraterrestrial races that had gone through that and made a bad decision and were trying to say, please don't do what we did. Don't be foolish like us. And so that, to me, is always stuck in my mind as saying, okay, at one level, it's, are we saving ourselves as individuals and our loved ones, which is what we've talked about for 10 years. But on another level, and on a larger level, you have to say, well, to what end? Where's this all going to go? What's the purpose of enduring all of this grief? Well, the purpose is to ensure our destiny, to bring about that millennium of peace and compassion that we're promised by prophecy. It's ours by right, but rightfully it's ours to lose as well. And that, for me, is really now the essence. And I know this is a smaller audience of people, but in my heart of hearts, this to me is where the battle is. What about you?
Everybody has a choice.
Everybody has a choice, but to me it's really a bigger picture. It's, well, how do the meek inherit the earth? Yeah, because that has really stuck with me for years. The very first time I heard that, I was a child. And I remembered that moment because I asked myself, how could the meek inherit the earth? Because as we know, you look in a dictionary and the meek are, pushovers. But it wasn't until I studied the etymology of the word that you go back to its original meaning. It is completely diametrically opposite to the current definition of the term. And the meek, as it really was, is that these are salt to the earth people, stout-hearted, compassionate, kind, caring. Spiritual, they're not exploiters. These are the people that really have love in their hearts. And I didn't know if I would see these people in my lifetime, but that's what happened when I watched Occupy Wall Street. No organized list of demands to negotiate into garbage, no corruptible leaders to speak for them, but on the other hand, no malice in their hearts. They're not out there saying, you have something that I deserve and you got to give it over, and I'm angry about my economic or political rights or all of that. It was about hope, about seeking a return of justice and of hope.
Of the true people that were in the movement.
True people.
Not the ones that came in and perverted it.
Yeah, and so, that was the reason why I created my video, 11-11-11, Occupy Wall Street, and Global Consciousness Swarming. And in the next segment, I want to talk about that video because you are a remote viewer, and that is one of the principal things I'm trying to get people to get their heads around. So let's do that in the next segment.
Okay.
Well, hey, I think that was a good segment. You could almost call it Marshall's soliloquy. Dad didn't get a chance to do much talking there, did you, Ed?
Oh, I talked plenty.
Oh, you're that strong silent type, huh?
I'm just silent.
Oh, that was good. And that last caller was really good. And the board has been going on. There's something about 7.3 weeks. If somebody could throw a comment on that, I'm curious. I'll bite. But in the next segment, we're really going to get very heavily into my new video which is focused for Occupy Wall Street. Now, what I want to do is talk to my regular audience about this and the reason why I did it. It's a 62-minute feature. It took me weeks to produce, put a tremendous amount of effort and time into it. And it's because what I saw with the folks, the good ones at the core, not the fringies that came in and, the media gloms onto them like white on rice, but the ones out there really doing it. And boy, they were the kind of people that in the back of my mind I'm going, these are the ones I want to survive. These are the ones I want to start fresh with the new world because they really get it. And the protests and everyone, sure, they say they don't have listed demands. Well, fine. Nothing to negotiate into mud. You don't have people you can corrupt as leaders. It's, all the old tricks. And what they say about the old tricks is old tricks are the best tricks, and it always has proven that way for the elites. But in this one, it's a much bigger thing. But before we get into it, Ed, one of the things we didn't cover was what initially got your interest with the Occupy Wall Street movement?
Just the fact that somebody got together to let them know that we weren't happy. And maybe finally they're not going to get away with murder all the time.
Yeah, I hope they get it. Although it was a pretty brutal shutdown. But, when I saw that, I said, God, I'm just so tired of seeing the elites kick everyone's ass. I get my ass kicked. They do all kinds of stuff to me. You want to see what they're doing to me? Go look at all my books on Amazon. Amazon is trashing me. I've been singled out. My books are always in stock. They say 3 weeks. My book descriptions have been trashed. I've written them about it, and they just said, hey, we have a right to be mean, and that's what we're going to do. Oh. So, again, it's one of those, where are you going to go with it? This is just the life we chose, and this is what we have to deal with. But this time, there's a different way, and I want, for those of you listening, to listen to this and understand the techniques I am promoting in this video. And I'm trying to get to an audience that really is not even aware of this. And so it's a way to gently get this information out there in a way that doesn't create any harm. But for the rest of you who are thinking about 2012 and what happens on the backside, these techniques of remote viewing and intention vortices are effective. They can work. And I know an intention vortice. In other words, you're focusing attention, you're projecting a thought into somebody else's mind. And I talk a little bit about it, but my real experience with this goes back many years ago when I first started working on my paranormal skills. And I was using some meditation techniques, and I was able to get to the point where I could just look at somebody far off in a distance and boom, they would just whip right around and look at me like, whoa, what are you doing? They have that violated look in their eyes. They could feel my presence in their mind. And it got to the point where I was experimenting with the Texas A&M and University of Texas game. Oh boy, talk about everybody and his brother coming out for that. And I sat there and I had a pair of binoculars, my own 7x35s, and I just decided to do an experiment. And I would look at people on the other side of the stadium, far up in the bleachers, to where I could barely make out their face with my eyes, but with a binocular I could see them fine. And I would just pick somebody out that was looking away, looking to one side or the other, and I would focus my sight on them, and it was just amazing. Women, very sensitive. Boy, they spot that stuff. They feel it. They sense it. Whip right around them. Next thing I know, I got somebody looking right down the barrel of my binoculars with that get the hell out of my mind look on their face, and that's putting it lightly. Guys, same thing. It just took longer for most of them. They're kind of not as sensitive to it as women, but all of them were sensitive to it. It just took longer to project that intention. After that, it took me a few weeks, actually a few months, to detrain myself because it really got to be disruptive in my life. So I know what you can do by projecting an intention, just focusing your mind on somebody else if you've had the right training and preparation. And what I'm saying in the video is, hey, if we're out on the streets, they're kicking our ass, but if you're sitting here in a living room, they don't know where you're at. And you can kick their ass. And so with that, well, let's learn how to do a little bit of elite butt whooping.
What I was really seeing with the Occupy Wall Street movement was how easy it is for the elites to crush a noble movement like that. I think that at this point, they've whipped it pretty bad.
Yeah, they're ineffective now.
They're ineffective, and I don't know that they can reorganize, although I would hope that they can, and that the movement will resurge because, as I explained earlier in the show, I saw how the Planet X 2012 topic resurged after elitist suppression. And my hope is that Occupy Wall Street could come back in a part 2.
If they do, we'd have to maintain them not getting perverted again by either hired thugs or individuals that don't have the movement as their best interest in heart.
Yeah. You know, the folks in the core of the movement really had the right beat on it. And what happens is that the elites will inject a bunch of destructive folks in there that give them a pretext for their heavy-handed techniques. And so they were easy for the picking. They were just easy for the picking.
They're trying to use physical assets.
Mm-hmm.
And the powers that be have more physical assets than they do.
Yeah.
They didn't really stand much of a chance.
They really didn't, you know. And it was when I heard Nancy Pelosi say, well, now you guys got to start, you know, raising cash. And I'm thinking, you know, that just sounds like somebody saying, hey, you need to drink the Kool-Aid.
I have to agree.
That, to me, just was not the way to go because I see a better way to do this. And in my book, Crossing the Cusp, Surviving the Edgar Casey Pole Shift, I talk about a technique called intention vortex, which we could actually use to mitigate the consequences of a space threat scenario. And that was the whole point of it. But what I wanted for them to have was a way to counter the elites, that there was no defense for the elites to employ against it.
That takes the physical realm out of it.
Takes the physical realm out of it to go virtual. And I will be honest, in there, I'm really revealing, I think, some very powerful information, but I went to very great pains to soften it and to stage it so that the usual attacks, you know, people laugh at me for putting Oprah Winfrey in there as saying, you know, she's an example of responsible wealth. Well, I put her in there because how am I talking class warfare if I'm saying we need more Oprah Winfreys, right?
Well, I would center our energies on attacking her.
Mm-hmm. The real crux of it comes in later on where I start talking about remote viewing and intention vortices. And so I know that you are a very skilled remote viewer. You have remote viewed 2012. And that was something that was instrumental in you becoming involved with the Planet X Town Hall. So first off, explain to the listeners your experience with remote viewing, how you came into it, then what you saw in 2012, and then we'll go back to the video.
Okay. Well, I originally was a student of Zen, and in Zen I learned to read the pictures that are put in front of my mind and decipher what the important ones were and what their meanings were. Mm-hmm. And after several times of doing it just for myself, it's not like I went to everybody with it, I was hitting pretty high percentage of what I was seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that there was another method beyond that, and through a friend I found out about remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
And through that friend, I met my teacher.
Right. Now, I understand that your teacher has asked you not to divulge his name because he's pretty well high placed in the remote viewing community and prefers his anonymity. So I'm not going to push you on that.
Yeah, he wants to stay anonymous at this point in time.
Okay.
I mean, he's very well known, but he's not going to become better known by me.
Okay.
And my actions. But I got into the remote viewing, and you can do coordinate remote viewing, which is it's not a absolute art form, but it is viable when done properly.
Okay.
And people have to get the right circumstances, the right environment to remote view. And everybody out there has the same tools as my teacher, myself, and any other remote viewer. I could mention a few big names, but we don't. Mm-hmm. It's not necessary, but they don't have any tool that we don't have. And so everybody can remote view. They just have to learn the methods of it.
That's right.
And the methods are out there on the internet all over the place. As long as you make sure it's a proper teacher. Geez, how do I decipher between one another? You have to use your own judgment. If one says that you can go 2 days and all of a sudden you can see everything, it doesn't work that way. It takes time and practice. And you have to learn to calm the mind and the soul and let it come to you.
That's right.
And pose the subject matter or whatever your question is and let it come to you and see what it looks like and then try to decipher it.
Well, that was the thing about remote viewing that appealed to me for this in terms of how the meek inherit the earth and how we do not see our destiny stolen from us, is that with remote viewing, it's a way to challenge the elites and the powers that be from the convenience of your own living room with complete anonymity.
I've never told anybody what I've really seen by remote viewing 2012.
Okay.
Because I always know there's a possibility I'm wrong, and the possibility is there that we can change it.
That's right. That's right, and I agree. But it's interesting in terms of what you're saying. It harkens me back to an interview I heard on Coast to Coast with Nuri and Ed Dames, famous remote viewing instructor. And Nuri had him on, and Ed was really sounding down. And he's going, how come you're so down? And he says, because I see so much evil in the world. And when Ed Dames said that, I melted inside because I know exactly what he's seeing. I see it too, and it's heartbreaking because the evil is just oozing up and it's reckless now. It's so crazy. And Nuri's going, well, what about this? And Ed's going, we're screwed. What about that? We're screwed. What about this other thing? Oh, we're screwed there too. So finally, Nuri's, hey, throw me a bone here. Is there any good news? And Dames goes, yeah, we're not going to have a global nuclear war because ETs are going to intervene and prevent that from happening. Otherwise, everything else is, forget it, we're screwed. But it was the depression in Ed's voice, because I've heard his interviews over the years, and always was kind of sharp and cocky and sure of himself. And this was a man that was seeing things that was breaking his heart. And he's seeing things in 2012 that breaks his heart. What are you seeing that broke your heart?
I might have seen the same things he sees, but my attitude and the way I decipher it might be totally different.
Okay.
He sees the negative side of it. I see the positive side.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The love and the spiritual abilities of these people.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't get, I'm not confirming what he saw.
Okay.
But if we were to have an alien intervention, there's a reason for that, and it's not because we're evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe the evil ones would be a part and partake of it.
Okay.
And it's everything you look at, you've got a positive side and a negative side. I try to look at the positive. If there's 10 bad people, that's the way it is. But if there's one good one, then that's the one you concentrate on.
Right.
And that's basically what you've done over the years is go to the people that are awakened and not concentrate on the ones that aren't.
Yeah. I've tried to help everybody that I can, and I will say this video it was a very substantial effort on my part, because I needed to move now to the transcendent issue, because I am in it for the species, and that means I want to see the meek inherit the earth. I mean, in this particular reality right now, the PTB, the elites, they own it, and nothing's going to take it away from them.
I feel that where the meek have the advantage, and to make it true, is they are spiritual. And I don't believe the powers that be are spiritual, so that is the meek advantage in that situation.
But only if they understand that.
Yes.
Which that was the whole point of my entire video. Really trying to tell people, look, you got the power to sit in your living room and kick their ass.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing the PTB can do about it. And then again, I'm not interested in getting tens of millions of people to watch it. I'm interested in getting out to the people that are resolved to make a difference.
And that's the people you must get to.
That's right.
And that's the one you will.
Uh-huh. And so it's a much smaller audience. You know, from an economic and business standpoint, it's a stupid thing to do. You don't go from a larger audience to a smaller audience, but
that's not your purpose.
It's not my purpose. Okay, my purpose is the evolution of our species. I want to know that I've done absolutely everything I can in this life to help folks achieve that millennium of peace.
Well, I was just going to say, if people are waiting for a savior to step forward and is going to lead them to the promised land, I don't believe that's going to happen. It will take a total group effort of those that are awakened to overcome the powers that be and bring this planet or our lifestyle back to where it should be.
That's right. The message from other races and the other entities is very clear. We have to be our own Messiah.
Bingo.
With that in mind, because I remember something Ed Dame said was that when it came to 2012 and the disasters of 2012, he said it's like, for remote viewers in general, it's 2012 is a blank space in what they can see. They can't see into it. I think a good reason for that is you have to have a very powerful spiritual love-based focus to look into that slice of time. And I know you have it. So you may be right, you may be wrong, and you may have something that we know that we need to change. But what have you seen in terms of physical events in 2012?
Well, like I say, it's not an exact science, but what I've seen has been mentioned by science, and you and I have sort of discussed it previously, and you know what I've seen. I know that our sun's going to flip its wig. We are going to have the superactive sun cycle that has been theorized, and we're going to pay the price for it unless we can do something to get beyond it.
Well, that's exactly what I show in my book, Crossing the Cusp, that in December of 2012, according to the Avebury 2008 formation, the sun is going to become so violent its corona will expand out to the orbit of Venus. And if that happens, we're roasted.
The people that are 2 miles underground will have to somehow fight their way through a melted crust to come back up.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen.
And for those of us on top, it's a different thing. But interestingly enough, the deep underground military bases, time and again, we were told by guides, amongst the various different sensitives that we channeled through, is that they're not going to do any better in their underground bases than we're going to do on the surface.
No, we're going to need an intervention of some kind.
So it is, however that plays out, it's a tough thing. But I think right now my focus is I want to see the meek inherit the earth. I want to know that I've done something with others to see that happens. And I don't want people to take unnecessary risks. And I sure don't want to see them humiliated and mocked and ridiculed like I've seen the Occupy Wall Street movement?
Well, every movement that would come out is people doing physical things.
Physical things.
Even if it's just holding a sign. And that can be countered by the powers that be with other people doing physical things and making them look bad.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little bit from the video. This was a report in the early 70s. It was issued by the Defense Department with an assessment of remote viewing. And then when we finish listening to that, I would like for you to just, give me your thoughts as to how those apply and what is possible and what is not possible based on what is known about remote viewing today, as opposed to when this list was, I think, in 71 or 72. So here we go. That is the list of 4 items as I have them in the video. Now what I want to do is go through them point by point with you, and you tell me what you know about remote viewing today that coincides or confirms with this document from the early 70s. Starting with A, to know the contents of top secret U.S. documents.
Well, that was the original intention of the program. It's a group remote viewing project, it was, for the military, probably still is. The idea was to remote view documents and plans and to report this information so that they could be a step ahead.
Okay.
And there was no way they could be detected.
And they've been successful in that.
Right, and that was the original intent of the program. My teacher was a part of that program.
Okay. Now, what I'd like the listeners to understand is that I have used remote viewing services over the years to help forward our research, but I am not a remote viewer myself. I intend to learn this skill at depth, but I have been using other forms of paranormal inquiry, channeling, and so forth. And so this is another skill, and there are many different skills.
Well, there are many paths up the mountain.
Yeah, there are many paths up the mountain. So the one I focused on was B, to mold the thoughts of key U.S. military and civilian leaders at a distance. And historically, is there evidence to back up that concern?
That can be done. It takes a group effort. You more or less have to target who you're wanting to affect.
Mm-hmm.
But that developed out of the program.
Okay.
I think I had mentioned to you that you don't really think that one of our soldiers just walked up on Saddam Hussein in that hole. We might have known where he was so that he could walk up to that hole.
Uh-huh.
And they might have even told Saddam what to do beforehand. But that was part of the program. It caused the instant death. That's sort of like the movie They Were Staring at Goats.
Yeah, Minister Goats, and I showed that in there, and that was the point at which actually the movie ends, is that the remote viewers themselves derailed this Machiavellian program because it ran counter to who they were. They felt that they had really brought a great sin upon themselves, even just by killing a goat. But, the question is it feasible? Are there remote viewers that are actually doing this?
Well, the program did break up.
Mm-hmm.
The absolute reason I'm not sure of.
Okay.
I do know the program disassembled, but then it was reassembled.
Mm-hmm.
And it is probably still a viable program today, but you can bet that other countries have learned how to do this program also.
Okay.
So we're not the only team in the game.
But in order to really do something like C, to cause the instant death of a U.S. official at distance, you're having to approach this from the standpoint of malice. You have an intention to do harm.
And it's not going to be just one individual that can do it.
So it needs a group of people with malice.
The more people, the more effective.
The more effective. And so the swarming aspect of the methodology that I'm presenting in the video is exactly what's necessary. And then there was D, to disable at a distance U.S. military equipment of all types, including spacecraft. That seemed to be a push for me.
Well, I'm not sure about that one. There's no, spiritual or psychic pathway into a machine.
Okay.
And I'm not sure about controlling equipment in a physical sense. There's no path in. I have never That now you're touching on telekinesis,
Right.
which is a totally different art.
Okay. So then going back to B, which is really just about changing people's minds, their self-perception, which is what I'm talking about in the video. If enough folks out there, and we don't need millions of people, we don't even need thousands of people.
Nope, but you don't even need hundreds.
You don't even need hundreds. And so developing a swarm of individuals who use the remote viewing to locate a candidate, and then they're projecting a loving intention, which in this case, in the video I'm saying is greed is not good, greed is a disease. Keeping it simple, as a remote viewer, do you find that to be something you would subscribe to as a tactic?
That is a viable thought to place in somebody's mind.
Okay.
Actually, it's a viable thought to put in everybody's mind.
Yeah, it really is. So, bottom line, it will work.
Yes.
The question is, will enough people come together to do it?
We will find out the hard way.
We will. Well, I think that'll be in 2012.
I do believe so, if not shortly after.
Shortly after. And but this is being my last interview of 2011. As 2012 comes into it, I sure hope enough people find a new interest in January and look at this and say, you know what? Instead of running the gauntlet and letting the elites beat the hell out of us, let's all just sit in our living rooms and give them hell.
It can be done. We're not going to win physically.
That's right. But it can be done.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's a great note to leave it on. Ed, fabulous interview. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
And you and I are coming back again right out the gate. You and I are going to be first up for the first show of 2012. I look forward to it.
Me too.
Well, hey, Ed, that was a fun interview, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was well worth the effort.
Yeah, and we've got some here's some comments here. Jeff was really sizing up the two possibilities. Yeah, I like it. You're underground, you get crushed. You're above ground, you get burned. Yeah, if you're going to be letting someone else do your thinking for you, Jeff. That is the whole point of everything Ed and I are doing here. And what do you think, Ed?
Well, perhaps my physical body will.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Jeff has also said not everyone who survives is going to be a spiritual life raft. Not everyone who perishes will be deserving. You can take the good with the bad and hope you have enough common sense and enough sixth sense to sort out the uglies from the beauties. Jeff, you're very, very well along in your thinking. You really are seeing this pretty well. What I would add to that is, I talk about something called the Great Winnowing, and it's described by the ancient Egyptians in the Colburn Bible, and I discuss it at length in Crossing the Cusp. And what it really tells us is that if you have malice in your heart, all right, it's a negative emotion. It becomes a lightning rod for more negativity. And so what happens is that we're going to have events that are going to generate an immense amount of fear. All of a sudden, you wake up in the morning and the world is coming unglued around you. People are going to be in a terrible state of fear. If you're prepared for this, spiritually, emotionally, physically, it'll be stunning, but you'll understand how to control your fear. And that is the most important thing. That's the reason why in 2012, I'm really devoting my attention to helping people eliminate fear. Yeah, we're all going to have it. To say you're not going to have something that causes you fear, come on, that's Pollyannish. But you can recognize when you have fear, and then you can channel that fear into something constructive and also eliminate it. And that is really important, because in the great winnowing, what happens is we're going to have fearful events. What the Egyptians tell us is when we see Planet X, they call it the destroyer. For those of you who read your Bible, it's called the destroyer by the ancient Hebrews as well, depending on the translation that you have. When we see the destroyer, which we will see it early in December according to Avebury 2008, very clearly, at that point it's no question about it. It'll be at its point of perihelion to the sun, its closest distance, and that's when things really start busting loose, because it's going to go into what I call the kill zone, and that is from the point of perihelion to the ecliptic. And because what Avebury says is the nature of the orbit and the way it's arcing in. And when we see it, we're going to have so much fear that women become infertile, men become impotent, and stop to think about that. For those of us that are older, that's not a far reach, I guess. That's why Viagra sells so well. But think about healthy young teenagers. I mean, stopping them from wanting to procreate. Now, just imagine that level of fear. And what the Great Winnowing says is when you are experiencing that fear, if you have malice in your heart, if you have fear in your heart, you have these negative emotions, it is like the mother of all jumper cables. Boom, it's just going to come right in like a lightning rod. The fear will overwhelm you. And what we have been told by guides, what the Colburn suggests, you switch off. It's not a lingering, miserable death. It's just like watching an incandescent bulb flicker a few times and then go dark. That's it. And that's how a lot of people are taking it. It will be the single largest cause of death, will be the Great Winnowing. So for people who are really wanting to prepare for what comes in the Great Tribulation, yes, you have to be cognizant of your material preparation. You need to, have your scoop packs, your caches, food set aside, and understanding that this is going to last not for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. We're talking about a few years. And so you're going to have to survive in stages. You may be stationary at first, but then at some point you're going to have to strap it on and go find sustenance and go find life wherever it can be. You're going to have to forage. You're going to have to look. You're going to have to go where you haven't gone before. And here's another thing that really just whacks people, is that they're so used to having cell phones, televisions, and all of this. Big solar storm, that's it. All of our electronics are toast. We are back to line of sight. We're back to before the telegraph. And you've got to be able to then, how do you project your senses beyond the physical line of sight, beyond what you can hear normally or smell? This is where you have to cleanse your soul of hate. I don't care how you do it. You find your method does it. But if you have malice, you have an expectation of evil to come on somebody else, you've got a lightning rod that's going to pull this generic fear into you, and it's going to kill you. That fast, folks. That fast. Now, on the other hand, once you purge that and you develop your paranormal, or what I call the superhuman skills or supernormal skills, whether you're doing remote viewing or you're channeling or you're auto writing, it doesn't matter. There's many, many different ways to extend your senses. But if you're doing that, now you're going to have a potential source of intelligence to help you find places of safety, to avoid places of danger, to know who you can trust and align with, because now you are really going in and building your sixth sense, if you will. And so that, for me, is the real focus of what I'm going to be doing in 2012, is working with folks who have come far enough in their material preparation that they have a comfort level with that. They know they've done as much. You can never do as much as you want. You can't get as many goodies as you want, and you have to be practical, but you know that you've done as much as you can. The next step is that spiritual development, extending your senses beyond the line of sight. And earlier we talked about Robin in Florida. Robin, this is part and parcel of what you should be doing as well, because you're in a very susceptible area. And this is part of how you get that 24 advance hour notice of what you're doing. Ed, what are your closing thoughts?
Well, Marshall, I think we're all going to be afraid. But the ones that know how to overcome that fear are going to do it spiritually. And the paths that will give us our escape will probably come through a spiritual process. It's not going to be like we're going to have the phone ring and somebody's going to say, hey, head over to the Allegheny Mountains and you're going to be saved over there. No, I truthfully believe from remote viewing, I know the messages come. And the way people will receive them are not going to be through the physical world. And they'll overcome the fear, get the message, and find a way to survive through a spiritual sense.
Right. And also, here's another aspect. It's not only extending your senses, freeing yourself of fear that pulls fear into you. And, folks, it has nothing to do with you're a good person or a bad person. You're judged. You prayed enough in church, passed the basket, whatever. No. I mean, I have to be honest. I hope it doesn't insult anybody. But when I look at the modern faiths, I see a bunch of institutions. Not one of them has ever proven they can survive a global catastrophe. And two, they're so wrapped in dogma and doctrine that people are taught not to think for themselves. I mean, how many of you out there, let me ask you, have you said or you've heard somebody else say, well, that's an interesting idea. I'm going to talk to my minister about that. Instead of just saying, that's an interesting idea. I'm going to go double check your facts on my own. That's part of being a spiritual thinker. That's what Ed is. That's what I am, is that we just pursue the truth wherever it leads you. And so by doing this, you will enhance your survival capabilities. But also another thing that I see coming up through all of this is we are going to have contact on a formal level. I mean, this is, there's enough evidence out there to put O.J. in death row 50 times over on UFOs. But, it's always, they're able to dodge it and make it something that it's not. However, when we do start making formal contact, and that is going to happen, your sixth sense is going to be very, very important to you, because species that will want to manipulate us are going to be looking to material thinkers, because they're much easier to deal with due to their own dogma and doctrine and expectations derived out of that. Spiritual thinkers they're going to avoid, because spiritual thinkers think for themselves. And that's pretty much my wrap on it for this evening. Ed, I'm going to give it to you. You got some stuff you want to throw into the hat?
Well, you covered it pretty well, Marshall. I'd just like to say this was a lot of fun, and